Hello and welcome to the fourth panel session on day 3 of Intelligent Transport's Transport Innovation Summit 2022, and sadly, the final session of our entire event. My name is Leah Hockley. I'm the editor of Intelligent Transport, and I will be supporting this session. During the discussion today, our speakers will be considering how 5G technology can benefit passengers and operators alike. Don't forget that throughout their discussion, all of our speakers will be answering your questions. So make sure to use the live discussion button at the bottom right hand of your screen to submit your questions, and the speakers will do their best to get through them. The role of moderator for this session will be placed in the more than capable hands of Jenny Martin, Secretary General of ITS UK, and I would now like to hand over to her to begin the discussion.
Thank you very much, Leah. It's a great pleasure to be here again. As we were saying earlier, I can hardly believe that it's been a whole year since we last did this. We have an excellent session for you, some really good panelists to talk about 5G and what it can deliver for public transport in all different ways. My panelists are Francis Sierra, who is Head of Engineering at Leonardo UK, Gerard Donoghue, who is the CTO at Telent, Nikos Tsampieris, who is Senior Manager Innovation and Deployment at Ertico ITS Europe, and Chepo Korbe, who is Chief Operating Officer at the Gautrain Management Agency in South Africa. So they will all bring a slightly different perspective, and I'm sure listening to them will be really interesting. Please keep your comments and your questions coming throughout, and we will weave them into discussion after the introductory remarks from our panel. We are in the UK, we are in what's known as the graveyard slot. It's 4 o'clock here and we are the last session, as Leah just said. But I am really hoping that there's lots of North and South Americans out there tuning in, because for you, we're in the middle of the day and much more convenient. So we're relying on you to keep our numbers up compared with the other sessions today. And do make sure to put your questions in so that it's a truly interactive session. I'm going to start by asking each of the panelists to tell us briefly who they are, a bit about the organizations they work for, what their particular interest is in 5G for public transport, and to give us brief overviews of any relevant projects and implementations they've already been involved in. So in no particular order, I'll start with Francis, if that's okay. Francis, could you introduce yourselves to the audience, please?
Yes, thank you, Jenny. My name is Francis Sierra. I'm Head of Engineering for Transport Control Solutions at Leonardo UK. And as part of my job, I evaluate new technologies and propose roadmaps to make those part of our own solutions. And I'm very excited to discuss today about 5G on this session and some of the 5G initiatives that we have been working within Leonardo. Leonardo has been working on a number of 5G initiatives for transport and cybersecurity. In transport, we have been working on a project to improve safety on the roads of Genoa, Italy, through experimentation with a 5G technology. And this has been going on since November 2020. Specifically, there are 4 different transport 5G initiatives. The first one is a traffic light priority for buses. That was actually completed in February this year. And there are some other initiatives due this year around driver alerts using 5G, taking advantage of network slicing, and some other initiatives like 3D modeling for road infrastructure using drones, and roads surface quality assessments through artificial intelligence. On the cybersecurity side, Leonardo has significant experience in the telecom sector, and we work with telecom providers to help them secure 5G networks for both public and private networks. We basically carry out risk assessments, we review the cybersecurity architecture, and assess the security compliance for 5G networks.
Thank you, Francis. That's really set the tone. We have a good understanding now about your capabilities and what you do. So thank you very much for that. I'll move next to Gerard from Telent. Your introductory remarks, please.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name's Gerard Donoghue. I'm the CTO for Telent Technology Services. We're a UK and Ireland only organisation. We have a long and good track record and pedigree in delivering of mission critical comms and services in the transport and in both road and rail. One of our biggest customers is Highways England, where we are partway through a major transformation of their network to support in excess of 30,000 roadside assets across a full backbone of IP and optical networks. My background around 5G is it's a technology that we had started to look at in 2019. We've had some success. We've actually got some physical deployments out there about the use of AI, automation, connected plant in particular. We're doing a work with a construction agency around building a tunnel or boring a tunnel, and they're actually using our solution to do innovation to see for health and safety perspectives, etc. And also a robotics manufacturing piece is another one that we've done. In terms of transport across road and rail, we do a lot of work with all of the major critical national infrastructure parts in the UK. 5G now as an innovation idea for these guys, they really are interested in seeing how they can leverage it. Much to Francis's point, we are doing very similar things, possibly not the cybersecurity piece just yet, but we are looking at all the types of applications and services that we do for traffic management, worker safety, all of the integrated approaches that you're going to see in a digital world, particularly around smart cities, where you're going to have a fully integrated service that needs decisions being based on known data or changing data in very, very low latency terms and direction. So what we're doing internally as an organisation right now, and we have some trials going with some of our transport partners, is to look at the applications and services that we use right now on rail, for example, asset management, station management, information, public address, mission critical comms, all of those things we currently do in a more traditional way. And we're starting to look at the ways we can use and leverage the performance of 5G to be able to give us a much more mobile experience that's going to kind of meet the demands of what people want and expect these days, particularly customers. They don't want to be able to go and look at an information board. They want to be able to get data, information to them in the way that they want to ingest data. So we're kind of doing like that right now. It's quite a long journey for us. It's been going on for 2 years. We've been working with key partners like Nokia on their solution, and it's been an interesting journey. Some of the things that people say around 5G, it's plug and play. It's not quite plug and play yet, but the reality is, as a technology, it's going to be intrinsic to us moving forward in this integrated world, because things are difficult now. Movement of population and people and safety and the reduction of infrastructure, such as what Francis talked about. They're all the kind of things that we're doing right now with 5G. So it's a very exciting time, very busy time. There's lots of ideas we've got, and I'm sure there's lots of other ideas that we can ingest from our user community. So that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Gerard. I think exciting is the word to sum it up. I'm not sure if I'm pleased, but I have to say, when I was first working in the ITS sector, your organisation was Marconi UK. That's how far I go back.
And before that, Plessey and GPT. Yes. As an organisation, it's been around for a very, very long time.
Yeah, very venerable and of good standing, definitely.
So
not quite as old as that, Ertico ITS Europe. I think you were founded in 1991 and 1992, Nikos.
As Pelham, but we were.
Yeah. Sorry, Nikos. I think Ertico ITS Europe dates back to the early 1990s. So not quite as venerable as Marconi, but please, Nikos, let us have your opening remarks.
Indeed, Jenny. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for the invitation, for your kind invitation. It is with great pleasure to sit in this panel and discuss on 5G and how to make mobility smarter. So I'm a senior manager at Ertico ITS Europe in Innovation and Deployment Department, and Ertico ITS is a 120 ITS stakeholder organization, 120 strong, I should say, stakeholder organization within the mobility ecosystem. It brings together 8 mobility sectors. We join forces to make mobility cleaner, safer, and more efficient. And we are working intensely for the convergence of CITS, cellular connectivity, and automated vehicles, while at the same time we are facilitating the evolution of road infrastructure. In parallel, to align with these activities, we run several innovation platforms, such as the TM 2.0, that works on interactive traffic management, which is enabled by key technologies and win-win governance models. And this work has fed into European policy activities, such as the CITS platform, the Roundtable of Connected and Automated Driving, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, and of course, other relevant European Commission consultation workshops and debates. We are involved in a plethora of R&D projects within the European research and development frameworks. And just to reference our work, I take as examples 2 of our projects, flagship projects, 5G MOBIX, which considers the interoperability of 5G in cross-border trials and is testing key 5G technologies, and also the SHOW project, which is a 4-year project and really sees with the deployment of more than 70 high-level automated vehicles on the road, making use of the existing infrastructure with all the connectivity modes, 5G, G5, whatever we consider as connectivity enabler is there, and has set very high ambition because we envisage within this project framework to transport over 1.5 million passengers over the 4 years of the project duration, and to transport also cargo with more than 350,000 containers. There are 69 partners involved there from 13 member states. There is a strong international component with twinning actions with Japan, with Singapore, Australia, Korea, and the USA. And to cut it short, at Ertico Partnership, we are working towards achieving a better connection between the infrastructure and services in connected automated driving. And we bring together experts of IoT, automation, and communication technologies from both the public and private sectors who meet regularly during workshops, webinars, and other Ertico events with a single aim to agree on concepts to materialize the roadmaps of our organization. Back to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikos. You certainly gave us a very good picture of just how active Ertico ITS Europe is. You do so many things, and I would recommend to the audience, go to the Ertico website. You can find all their different projects there. They do a lot. And I would specifically mention, you've just published your first moonshot report, haven't you? Which is the Ertico Moonshot is a look at, I think, well over 100 cities all over the world, in all the different regions of the world, with a snapshot of their transport technology situation and other interesting things they do. So yeah, look up Ertico, look up their projects, and particularly have a look at the Moonshot. I think that's a really good one.
Yes, it's a great initiative of ours. 300 cities will have been conducted by the end of this initiative. with a view to see their needs and requirements for sustainable and smarter mobility. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an excellent initiative, well worth several plugs. So moving on to Chepo Kobe from South Africa. Please, can we have your introductory remarks?
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you for having me on this panel. As the Chief Operating Officer, I wear multiple hats. But let's first explain what does the Gautrain Management Agency do. As the management agency, we actually have a concession on our rail network, on our rapid rail network, and we are the agency that owns and manages the assets of the Gautrain itself. So that requires us to be able to look long term, so to look beyond the actual concession itself, and then manage the assets in the long term basis. In addition to that, I'm also responsible for managing the integration of all the ticketing in the whole of the province. And when talking about the province, you're talking about a province with 3 large cities and with 70% of all mobility movements going across the borders of cities. And therefore, you actually need one ticketing system that enables you for one person to travel with one card from one place to another. So you've got 3 BRTs implemented in these 3 cities. You've got a rail system that connects all 3 cities, which is our network. And then we have our own buses that have their own ticketing system. So we have to bring all of that together. But in addition to that, I'm also responsible for helping the local minister provincially in setting up the strategy for the province itself. And in the middle of all of that sits what we call data-centric mobility. And in data-centric mobility sits the integrated fare that I was talking to you about, a big management center to manage all the transport in the whole of the province, and a big API that enables everything to happen. But all of that needs a smart communication backbone. And that communication backbone is what led us to be able to start investigating 5G. There's a lot of key rail system and key systems that we will lay down as fiber. But fiber by its nature takes forever, as what do they call it, to lay down and then ultimately to activate and all of that. But what 5G has brought, it has brought the ability of smaller sites that can be deployed everywhere else, that can be owned, and it has actually reduced a lot of the costs that were there with the the 4G network as it was, and you could have multiple repeaters all around the network that doesn't require you to deploy as much cache as you had with the previous network. So for us is how do we make it efficient? How do we make it connected? How do we make sure that, what do they call it, that it has citizens' impact? And that's the phrase that we use. It then benefits the people that are using it. And with that, you get what we call, the connected bus stop, the connected freight networks, the connected rail network, and the connected bus network. So we are enabling all of that as part of the integrated fare management. Thank you, Jenny.
Well, thank you very much. That's really interesting. If I can take the privilege of the moderator to ask you a specific question, my knowledge of the Gautrain really goes back to when it was first, well, first of all, it was an idea and then it was a project, because I was very involved with ITS South Africa at that point. And I remember that one of the motivations behind it, it wasn't just to improve transport between the airport and downtown Joburg or what have you. It was there was a desire to generate economic growth along the line. And I certainly know that when I traveled on it, which is a good few years ago now, some of the stations they weren't in urban areas, they were in open fields. And that, so I could see that this must have been designed with that in mind. So it'd be really interesting, I think, not just for me, but also for the audience to know, has this economic growth, has it actually manifested itself? Have you had some success with that?
Yes, Jenny, we did a study about a year back. We actually did a study in 2014, and then we completed a new one, which was finished in 2019, just towards the end of 2019. And the one in 2019 was quite incredible. In actual fact, it showed, and it didn't come from us, it came from the property management companies, that 59% of all major, when I'm talking about major development of properties and retail and all of that in the whole spending of the whole of South Africa happened in and around Gautrain stations. And that to us, in actual fact, I had to go back to the South African Property Association and say, what do you mean around the whole of South Africa? They said 59% of all expenditure, cumulatively had spent in and around that. And with that comes, so you've got the buildings that are put up, you've got jobs that then are generated from anything, from services that are required by those buildings, and then ultimately the maintenance of those buildings. And then in itself, some of the parts of what do they call it, of the system, they were actually literally dead towns. And now you've given more of years into it, probably about 15 to 20 years, just purely by setting up a station there. And the property development has been, it's just but one of the, what do they call it? And then the subsequent suburbs in and around each of the stations, it has shown that they are, the price of properties in that place had year on year grew by 5%. So if you were looking at in and around the station, a kilometer radius, 2 kilometer radius, each one of these cascadingly benefited quite a lot from, and in actual fact, it's a weird story that properties are sold on the proximity to Gautrain stations. So people would actually, at development stage, they have nothing in the ground. They say, this property is 500 meters away from the Gautrain station. So it is a big part. And if you think about it, we have 3 cities that sit next to each other, and the general commuting time probably at the worst case, which was probably in 2015, it was about an hour and a half for you to go through probably 40, 50 Ks. And that is the big motivator of the system itself.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you for the update. And I'll probably follow up with you offline about actually getting a copy of this report. That would be really interesting. Thank you.
It is fine. It is actually on our website, and it can be shared with anybody, and we can share it with all, with your audience.
Great. So all of you in the audience with an interest in transport for economic growth and also cost benefit analysis, there you are. There's your weekend reading is now sorted out. So while we've been doing our introductory remarks, which I hope you all found interesting, we have had some question come in from the audience. I will read it out because I'm not entirely sure whether my panelists can see it as well as I can. The question is, when do you, the panelists, think that the industry is going to start using mobile phone metadata fed into artificial intelligence for transport planning and DRT, demand responsive transport? I think all of you actually alluded to at least part of that question in your introductory remarks. I will just do you in the same order, I think. So, Francis, mobile phone metadata and AI, when is the time for that coming? Maybe it's already here.
I think so. I think we're starting to see how there are different communication systems like a cellular vehicle to everything that are potentially exploiting that capability where we can actually use information coming from cellular phones and create an ecosystem in smart cities. So I think very soon we're going to start seeing new real-time features that are going to take advantage of that environment. And in some occasions, it could be that different passengers could be sharing some metadata around the location or the intent to travel, or maybe in some of the cases might be linked to safety features. But it's definitely something that is happening now, and I would like to mention one of the initiatives that we're actually carrying out using a vehicle to everything. At the moment, we are running an initiative in Genoa around driver alerts with the intention to increase safety. And this is expanding the scope not just to public transport vehicles, but also more vulnerable users like cyclists and other people using a public transport. And the main goal of this capability is actually to make the public transport drivers aware of things that are not on their line of sight. And by using a cellular vehicle to everything, we're able to inform the drivers that, for example, a vehicle had an incident in the next intersection, and things like this. So I believe we are now cultivating these technologies, but they should be available in a very near future.
Thank you. I'll go to Gerard next. Mobile phone metadata and AI.
Yeah, actually, in certain use cases, I think it's already here. We're seeing examples of behavioural patterns being used by AI for footfall, etc., around that metadata itself. And what that does is obviously that allows you to start to sort of build sort of that behavioural pattern, allows you to actually understand what that user's demographic is doing, where they're going, how they travel, when they travel, all of those kind of initiatives. And it's something that we've probably talked about internally quite a lot, is actually the flip side of that data is actually what we're starting to see a lot of, is people actually see that as a monetization opportunity to actually get some money or start to use that data. You know, I was with an AI-driven company yesterday, app-driven on mobile devices yesterday, talking about how you can do a 3 to 6 times monetization of your data, as it said, not specifically in transport, but those use cases. So, you know, we're starting to see that. We do a lot of work in stations. We've provided an awful lot of station type services to the end user customers. We're starting to see how we can interleave the 5G piece into that for operational users, because of when there's an event, first thing people do is turn their phone on. They're either messaging or they're using video, YouTube as an example, to showcase that event. So we're kind of seeing that as a, you know, that AI-driven data information mindset is right now, right here. And we're starting to see lots of innovative companies coming to us saying, we've got this idea, but we've got no way of delivering it because they're not big enough, or, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, we've chatted around, you know, we do a lot of stuff with radio comms inside buses, but that's sort of legacy stuff. And, you know, when you start to look at all of the advantages of 5G, the ability to send large volumes of data into the cloud or locally, to correlate information and start to send that information back to the user, then obviously there's some real tangible benefits from that. And I think, you know, when we look at transport in this decade and beyond, how we deliver transport services and the information and how people ingest that information from those transport companies to make decisions on how they travel, when they travel, or where they travel to, you're going to need that kind of granularity and ultimately the high performance network that something like 5G delivers. So I think it's here. Is it quite there? Possibly not, but I think there are lots of things that I'm seeing where we're on the cusp of it being delivered into sort of very simple information share between users and things.
Yeah, thank you, Gerard. Yeah, I fully agree with you. I'm sure it's not here all over the world, but it's certainly here in many places. I mean, here in London, it's quite a few years since I was told by Transport for London that they were supremely unconcerned about the fact that we don't touch out on buses here. So they know when we got on the bus, but they don't know when we left, because they do know where we leave. And not only do they know when we leave, they know where we go to as well. And that's been the case for a few years. So I think you're right there. Moving on to Nikos, I'm guessing that Ertica probably has been doing many projects on this. You're on mute, Nikos.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Indeed so. Francis and Gerald have almost said it all. Artificial intelligence, and I put into play as well machine learning. They are great enablers and they work very well together with 5G, that's cloud, to let's say to build up mobility ecosystem. We know that huge amounts of data, of course, are generated in automated vehicles. We know the strength of 5G C-V2X has, and I believe that the moment is, as Gerald said, here and now, as all these technologies have matured, and this revolution is happening right now, and as you said, not all over the world, because even 5G is not fully deployed all over the world, but still in most places, all these, let's say, ingredients of a smart mobility ecosystem are there.
Thank you. Chepo?
Oh, that's an interesting question, and it's not when, it's why are you not doing it at the current moment. So let me give you an example. We have a partner on the system who is an insurance company owner, and what they do is they use that metadata from the mobile network to be able to understand where the owners of the vehicles come from and what is the nearest station that they can take. And then they incentivize them by giving them a, what do they call it, money back on their insurance if they use the Gautrain. So if they use the system and they don't travel with the car from city to city, and they actually use the, so that metadata then comes to us, and then it enables us to then plan our service. So in addition to what they have, we know how many people we will get at any particular station, because those people would buy either their monthly ticket or their pay-as-you-go to be able to cover the area that they travel on. So and beyond that, you have more than that. So when we had one protest in one of the cities, people were moving from all over the province. And through that metadata, we were able to plan for the afternoon service by knowing very well how many people actually went to that protest and how many are going to come back. So how many of them used the system and how many are going to come back. So I was able to keep an additional, a bit of rolling stock on two of the stations that they were going to use the most. And so as well as we were expecting them to come back in droves, they might have left one by one. It became easier for us to be able. So the planning is, and as I say, it's not about when you're going to do it. It will be forced to do it. And through COVID, we found a lot of opportunities to do it. So one of the opportunities that we had was overcrowding management. One of the things that we've never ever been able to do very well in a lot of transport systems, managing overcrowding. And being able to give a passenger or a commuter the right data of which bus is full, or which train is full, or which coach is full. And with that metadata, you are able to send it back. So we've developed an app that will probably be putting into service in the next few months, which then tells you, for instance, on 3 clicks, you can say, I want to travel at 7:30. And the app will tell you, no, the 7:30 train looks like from wherever it's coming, it's going to be full. Because it's just looking at the number of mobile phones that are already on, what do they call it, on that vehicle. So you travel on an earlier service or a later service. And with time, you also get that metadata. You can develop trends and be able to check patterns of how people travel. So as I say, it's not about when are you going to do it, it's why are you not doing it at the current moment. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so some really good concrete examples there of the benefits that can be gained, which ties me quite nicely into another question here, which is how does 5G connectivity enable the industry to be better equipped to navigate current and future challenges? So Chepo's already given us a couple of examples from the Gautrain, but I'm sure that the panel can think of some more. So I'll start with you, Francis. Some examples of where 5G will enable us to do things that we just couldn't do before.
Yes, indeed. I suppose an important point here is understanding the current and the future challenges and how those will affect passengers and operators. One of the main challenges is going to be the amount of devices connected within smart cities. We have passenger mobile phones, vehicles, infrastructure, sensors. I think interoperability standards are going to play a very important role, harmonizing how we exchange information. I mentioned before vehicle to everything as one of the communication systems that allows vehicles to communicate with other vehicles, with infrastructure, etc. This is going to be critical in order to achieve a harmonized way of exchanging data when we have millions of devices connected through 5G. Another important area is the provision of new real-time services and the orchestration on how that will work on a cooperative mobility ecosystem. So, for example, very clearly, we're going to need new integration platforms and applications to achieve that seamless integration between devices with the ability to ingest and correlate information in real time from many different parties. In this respect, I suppose most of the products that we're currently working in Leonardo are taking into account the integration side of things, because this is essential. And in many cases, we provide fleet management solutions or traffic light systems. In all of them, the integration is essential. And these integration platforms basically enable us to orchestrate the communication between heterogeneous solutions. So I think that is going to be a very important area when we look into the challenge of orchestrating and deploying new services with 5G. The last item is probably around data. We are moving into a world where data is driving how we design solutions and services. So capturing and processing data is going to be essential. Integration with public clouds that would enable taking advantage of a lot of the services that the public cloud is able to offer. And I think very specifically around 5G, multi-access edge computing is going to change a lot on how the applications perform on a 5G environment, because we are bringing services closer to the end user, and that makes available a lot of computational power that wasn't available before. So now we have applications that can run very close to the user and are able to perform artificial intelligence or video analytics in real time. And that is going to enable the analysis through data analytics and basically enhance the view and how the different public transport are performing at the moment.
Right, thank you. Gerard, I'm always feel guilty about asking you to follow that, because that was I couldn't think of anything to add, but I'm sure you can. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, it is by Francis. It's funny because Francis is absolutely right, and we're probably competing and collaborating really. In that, I completely agree with quite a lot of the things he said. So you know, I've been talking internally as a business about edge, or MEC, multi-access edge compute, and its use cases. So when you look at technology per se, not so much transport, but technology, everything's driven to the cloud for the last 5 years. But the reality is, when you look at the IoT space, so sensors, that could be a CCTV camera, it could be a discrete device. But if you look at modern vehicles and trains, there are hundreds, possibly thousands of sensors in a vehicle, for example. So that's not even talking about the people. That's just information that can be ingested into a data lake. Now, whether that data lake is local or in the cloud, but the reality is, you know, and we're looking at this quite a lot. We're actually looking at, ironically, a integrated product, which is 5G backhaul, satellite backhaul. It's got MEC. It's got wireless, you know, it's got everything you need in a box, basically, for a vehicle. And you look at those kind of things, the data, sort of the challenges around deploying 5G, the thing that, you can do a lot of stuff with 4G and wireless and all those sort of things. But one of the things is the performance, the latency, the ability to execute a change almost in near real time. If you look at sub 6 gigahertz, it's typically about 10 milliseconds. When millimeter wave comes, which is a few years away, which is 26 gigahertz, we're talking about sub 2 milliseconds. So when you start to think about this autonomous world that we're all striving to live in, connected vehicles, connected people, connected cities, connected everything, that kind of is where 5G is going to have to get to. In terms of transport, for example, and the challenges around that is, right now we run kind of to Chepo's thing with the two train analogy was really a really interesting concept, because if you look at transport per se in the future, in London, when Boris Johnson was in charge of London, might not be a great example, but he talked about pods, sort of autonomous pods for people as a method of transporting around London to ease the congestion problem. But when you look at that transportation piece, is a red bus the right vehicle to carry 90 to 100 passengers when with the use and advances of AI and all of that data set, the intelligent bus stop, how many people are actually standing at that point at any given time and where do they want to go? You might start to look at a completely different model for transport, where it's smaller vehicles, more agile, can go to different points and places. And then you start to think about how you integrate things like what 3 words, that 3 meter diameter, your app on your phone, or the heuristic behavior we talked about earlier is actually telling you, well, actually, these are the points I want to get to and at what point. And that app and all of the information that's delivered to a public transport organisation, dare I say it, Uber-esque type piece, is delivered, and then you can then start to harmonise what you do around congestion. There's things like, there's a big drive for carbon net zero across the world, and the ecosystem. So you want to start to reduce the amount of traffic. Car ownership in the UK is probably going down, particularly amongst the Gen Y and Gen Z type. They don't have an interest for cars. If they want to get a car, they'll just go on an app and they'll hire a zip car for X amount of time. So you can start to see how things are changing. But that probably puts more emphasis on public transport and how we use 5G for that exact reason. So you need this high performance network to move all this data around. The thing that I think that edge compute or MEC is really going to bring is it's going to act as a way of stopping an awful lot of unnecessary traffic reaching the cloud, but the most important information reaching the cloud, so that you can make really well-informed decisions in the big data lake and push that back to the edge, to the sensors. And again, obviously you need a highly effective communication method for that. So, that's kind of where 5G and beyond is going to become the de facto standard because of the pure performance of it. That's all. That's me.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's some really interesting points there. I mean, I certainly feel that it's this type of data is key to public transport provision in rural areas, because I do, the certainly the European model, which is that if you wish to live in a rural area, you had better be able to drive, and if you can't, then you'd better live somewhere else. Yeah. And if we could solve that, to me that'd be such a great achievement. So that's just one thing, and yeah, you highlighted many others. So thank you. So Nikos, I mean, Ertico has a great history of horizon scanning and spotting the next big thing. So I'm sure you'll be able to add a few things for us.
Jenny, thing is that I see it from another angle, and to allow 5G to be an enabler for smarter public transport, we have first to address, let's say, a unique challenge. Public transport system, as we very well know, is a living system, and people and businesses are depending on it. This means that interrupting, let's say, the service to make upgrades or changes or introducing new technologies is really difficult. It's not an option. and at a practical level, making changes to, say, public infrastructure, transport infrastructure of this size is extremely complex and time-consuming. I read with interest somewhere that public systems, transport systems, are much like icebergs. Large portions of the vital infrastructure are hiding beneath the surface. And in order to gather data, to uncover these hidden layers and, let's say, direct them towards another common goal, is the first step really to implement and achieve a digital transformation of the type that 5G can really enable. 5G, of course, my fellow panelists said, has high bandwidth, has ultra high speed and low latency. And of course, the ability to connect, it was mentioned before, and this connect hundreds, not to say millions of devices, and therefore to enable the Internet of Things, which of course is one of the key transformative factors, let's say, in the mobility ecosystem. This is a step, and to take it a step further, I always like to look further ahead, vado poro, further towards the future. We'll be speaking soon for the Internet of Mobility, which will be decentralized. Somebody mentioned blockchain before, will be blockchain, and everything will be connected in any way possible at all times, offering ubiquitous connectivity.
Great, thank you very much. And last on this topic, Tsepo, what future challenges do you see coming your way where 5Gs can be really helpful?
So I think Gerard had already started talking about it, and post-COVID, one of the biggest challenges that we will have is everybody's going to be looking for what we refer to as personalized public transport. So everybody would say, no, the Gen Zs don't want to buy a car, but they still want to have what's called personalized public transport. And that personalized public transport, that's where autonomous vehicles now come in. Start talking about autonomous vehicles, you're calling about the ability to be able to stand in a city like London, call up in an autonomous vehicle, and all you need to do when the vehicle gets there, it's show it the QR code, and it will open just purely for you. And maybe people are talking pods. Pods are not that far off. We're already talking about vehicles like the EZ10s, that they already have contained that level of intelligence. But you need what do they call it? You need the constant connectivity. Initially, while we're getting to learn how the technology works, there's always that certainty that somebody will take over this vehicle if it goes, it disconnects from what do they call it, from the network itself, and it can be driven remotely. But as the technology gets better and better, then what you'll be able to do, and smaller city areas can easily be managed with smaller vehicles. And therefore you don't need to be sending a big red bus in there, and rather small vehicles that are actually, one is they'll be electric, so therefore there'll be no carbon emissions. So a lot of the areas that get pedestrianized, you're finding that a lot of cities are going towards that level of personalized public transport. It's still public transport, because it can be used by anybody. But what you need is an app that functions very well. It can easily connect you to any vehicle that is nearby. And the storage of these vehicles doesn't become complicated. They can go into normal parkings, and then you call them up, and then in a few seconds. Now, one of the biggest challenges with personalized public transport is that people want it, and they want it now. Gen Zs, by their nature, they are impatient, they are not loyal to any what do they call it system, and they're data driven. And to be able to get that hungry need for you to be able to deliver when they want you to deliver, we have to rethink how we do public transport. Now, one of the other things that we're going to be able to look at, and we have to be owner to that, is that I think it was the Imperial School of Economics in London that said 14 to 15% of original commuters are saying they will not return to public transport. Now, in essence, if you're talking about a wipeout of 15% of your revenue, you're going to have to fill it up with something else. And how can we leverage things like 5G? When you sell advertising now, it's not more about my footfall. It's all about, at any particular time, what is the dwell time in front of that advertising? Mm-hmm. And that's where we go back to that metadata on cell phones, because from the manner in which the cell phones ping back to the towers and everything else, you can actually be able to accurately tell an advertiser, this is the amount of time somebody spends in front of this advertising. And therefore, I think this is much more valuable than, and that is going to be an area where us as public transport owners and public transport operators are going to have to leverage what we call the resilience plan, a plan that goes beyond us being reliant on fair revenue. And part of that, I mean, I've just given one example of how we can leverage and kick up the prices on advertising just purely from having the metadata of how many people see not only how many people see the board, but how many people, their dwell time in front of that particular board. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. That's you really are an excellent panel. So many future use cases which do sound entirely realistic and plausible. So there's probably people listening to this seeing all sorts of business opportunities. But that's as long as we're giving some to the audience, that's great. I can hardly believe it, but it's already time for me to ask you to give your final remarks. It seems 5 seconds since I asked you to give your opening remarks, but just to make sure that you each have a sensible number of minutes to do this. So I suppose in obviously you can make any remarks you like, but I think what would be interesting for the audience to hear particularly would be what will you and your organization be doing next with 5G for public transport? What are your immediate plans? What innovations and successes should we be looking out for? So I'll go the same way around again. I'll start with you, Francis.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think what is clear is that 5G is here for the long run, and it's allowing a lot of new transport services that were not possible before. This involves the development of new hardware, software, and more importantly, these integration frameworks that would allow us to fully exploit this technology in transport and smart cities. Understanding the different stakeholders' needs and how to achieve seamless integration and interoperability is going to be crucial. We have to remember that at the end of the day, we want to enhance the passenger experience, the safety of the transport, the reliability, and also contribute to the decarbonization. Those are key goals when developing services using 5G technologies. From Leonardo, we are committed to drive innovation, running 5G initiatives for transport and cybersecurity to be part of that future.
So that's what we need to look out for from Leonardo. So thank you very much. How about Gerard and Talent?
Well, we're probably going to be, because we're more operational engineering type organisations, so probably the early focus would be on ensuring, worker safety, that kind of thing, around 5G, actually sort of improving cost efficiency. So some of the stuff that costs an awful lot of money is the construction side of transport infrastructure. So if you look at road or rail, there's an awful lot of money poured into concrete, and to Nicolaas's earlier statement, the iceberg statement, there's an awful lot under the waterline that no one ever sees and how it works. So that's where we kind of work. And I think, we're doing those kind of initiatives. We're also talking to the likes of Network Rail around what the operational side. So some of the things that we've talked about sort of transport, so the things that I've been doing for a few years is, Stadia. So a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on wireless being the de facto standard for the customer experience, and it can still be that, and we still believe that that's, for some of that information, it's true. But to the point earlier about ubiquitous connectivity, I talk about it all the time. Gen Z, Gen Y, even Gen X, but everybody in general doesn't really care how they connect to the data. Okay, so if you look at, I've talked a lot about, a lot of people who used to search for wireless networks, they don't really care because the tariff on their phone is quite high volumes of data anyway, and they just really want to get access to that data, as they're very impatient. As I did laugh about that because I actually agree completely. But it's those kind of things. So we're going to probably focus on the more operational side of things because that's where we work strongly. That's not to say that we don't also do work with people around revenue generation. We work with leading sort of media companies inside the rail, so people like Global One or Exterior Media. We've done an awful lot of work with panels and ticker tape panels rather than this loop of information down the advertising and to that dwell time, and those kind of things are going to happen. But I would say right now for us it's more operational. But that's not to say that we won't get into the revenue-based, revenue-generating type things. We'll be an enabler of that. We won't benefit from that. That'll be our end customer.
Great, thank you, Gerard. And what's next for Ertico, Nikos?
We'll continue working intensely to realize our roadmap for reducing the CO2 emissions, to improve, to reduce traffic congestion, and continue working on the CCAM single platform initiative and CCAM various working groups to which we are contributors. So to realize our mission and vision through the projects we are running, and to take stock of the project I mentioned in the beginning. So we are working to realize 13 pilots in 13 European cities, and we want to see within 2 years' time tangible results pertinent to the goals I mentioned earlier, Jenny. Thank you.
That's great, Nikos. So hopefully you'll be back at this conference in 2 years' time to report on that. That'd be great. And finally, Chepo, what will be the next achievements for the Gautrain?
So for us, and I think which is the agenda for a lot of rail operators around the world, is how do we recover from the COVID period? But fundamentally is how do we disruption-proof the systems long-term wise, and that's fundamental to what do they call it, to long-term resilience of these systems, and how can we look at different as travel patterns are changing and reasons for travel are changing. Then the first thing that you'll have to do is ask, how can I find capital light solutions that actually create operational efficiencies? And those capital light solutions lie in technology and 5G is a great enabler on that. And then the second issue is the issue of deep integration. And when talking deep integration, that's when, and I don't want to bring up the word mass because so I know a lot of people start rolling their eyes when you start telling them about mass. But I'm talking about deep integration, and deep integration where when you're talking about Gen Z, they don't care. They have their trip going from one place to another, or their agenda on the day being, I want to go there, I want to pick up that and do this and that, and they want the data in their hands. And that deep integration means you are no more just a public transport operator. You have to connect to other services and collaborate. And then ultimately for us is, how can we use the 5G network to deepen our green agenda, bringing on electric vehicles in en masse. So thinking of a zero carbon transport network. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. That's great. So all I need to do now is to thank all of you. It's been fascinating for me to listen to you all. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Audience, please get in touch with us via the event platform or find us on LinkedIn. We'd all love to carry on talking to you. And I now need to hand over to Leah from the events organisers to make some final remarks. But I also want to do what not enough people do. I want to thank Tony and Banstri and Leah for organising this. Without you, we wouldn't be here and we would have had a lovely session. Over to you, Leah.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jenny. That's really lovely. And I'd like to, return thanks to everyone that took part in this session today. Nicholas, Chepo, Francis, Gerard and Jenny, the discussion was absolutely fantastic, and it's been fantastic having you join us as well. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to our audience as well for joining us, as well as submitting your questions. Unfortunately, not only have we reached the end of this session, but we have also now sadly reached the end of Transport Innovation Online Summit 2022. So I'd just like to take a quick moment to thank everyone that has joined us over the course of the last 3 days, as well as thank all of our fantastic speakers who have kindly joined us to share their insight, their expertise and their opinions on some of the key developments and challenges in the fields of ticketing and payments, mobility as a service, DRT, mobility data, and new and future mobility and technology throughout the course of our event sessions. While this may be the end of our online event, we are very much looking forward to welcoming you back in November 2022 to our first in-person event since 2019. Taking place in London after nearly 2 years of fully virtual events, we absolutely can't wait to see you all there and to facilitate even more in-depth and engaging discussions. To our audience, wherever you are in the world, we hope that you've enjoyed your time with us and that you have a lovely weekend. But for the last time for this event, thank you once again to all of our speakers for this session today, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you.